Prepare for war with the code. Number 8. Goat testicle implants. Gentlemen, let's talk about vitality. In the 1920s, if you were feeling a little sluggish, you didn't have a modern solution. Instead, you had John Brinkley, a man with a questionable medical degree and a radical idea. Brinkley became one of the richest doctors in America by convincing thousands of men that the secret to youthful energy and sexual stamina lay inside the scrotum of a billy goat. His theory was simple. Goats are energetic, so if a piece of goat's testicle is sewn inside a man's scrotum, that man will gain that vigor. He performed this procedure thousands of times, tucking a slice of raw, unprocessed goat gland right next to the patient's own tissue, often charging the modern equivalent of $10,000. Biologically, the human immune system immediately recognized and attacked the foreign goat tissue, causing severe infection, inflammation, and calcification. Yet thanks to the powerful placebo effect, many patients initially claimed the treatment worked, at least until complications arose. Brinkley eventually lost his medical license and was exposed as a fraud, but his legacy remains a striking example of medical quackery targeting men's vanity. Number 7. Bloodletting. If you visited a doctor anytime between ancient Greece and the late 19th century, their standard solution for almost every ailment was, "We need to drain some of your bodily fluids." This practice was founded on the ancient theory of the four humors, which stated that sickness was caused by an imbalance of four core liquids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. For centuries, doctors often assumed that blood was the fluid everyone had a surplus of. If you had a fever, bleed them. Pneumonia? Open a vein. Even a minor ailment warranted draining some blood. Physicians, and often the local barber, would slice open a vein in an arm or neck or attach leeches to remove significant amounts of blood. The logic was often circular. If the patient got worse, the doctor assumed they hadn't removed enough blood yet. A famous figure who underwent this treatment was George Washington. After falling ill, his doctors removed large volumes of blood in a short period. Though well-intended, this practice often severely weakened patients, slowing recovery and making the body less capable of fighting infection. It took centuries to realize that removing the substance that carries oxygen was counterproductive to healing. Number 6. Heroin cough syrup for kids. Got a cough that just won't quit? Is your toddler crying because of a sore throat? In the late 19th century, the Bayer Pharmaceutical Company had a solution: a bottle of pure, high-grade heroin. In 1898, Bayer launched heroin, aggressively marketing it as a non-addictive substitute for morphine and an effective cough suppressant, specifically targeting children and infants. The logic was that it calmed the respiratory system, which it absolutely did. Parents loved it because their sick, fussy children would take a spoonful and instantly drift into a deep, silent, chemically induced rest. Doctors were initially thrilled because patients stopped coughing immediately. However, it took only about 15 years for doctors to notice a critical issue. Their patients were developing severe physical dependence on the substance. Furthermore, incorrect dosages carried the extreme risk of severe respiratory suppression. By 1913, Bayer stopped making it, realizing that creating a generation of users with strong dependency was detrimental to public health and long-term brand reputation. Number 5. Quicksilver syphilis cures. Before penicillin arrived to solve our collective health problems, catching a disease like syphilis was a major health crisis. For centuries, the gold standard for treating syphilis was mercury, or quicksilver, a toxic heavy metal. The phrase, "one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury," was a grim reality. Patients were rubbed with mercury ointments, fed mercury pills, or locked in fumigation boxes, where they inhaled mercury vapors. The idea was that the heavy metal would cause excessive drooling, which doctors believed was the body purging the disease. In reality, the mercury was a powerful neurotoxin. The side effects were devastating, including rapid loss of teeth, severe gum and bone decay, and profound neurological damage. Patients suffered from tremors, hallucinations, and severe cognitive decline. While attempting to kill the disease, the treatment often introduced brutal systemic poisoning, significantly accelerating the patient's physical and mental decline long before the disease reached its final stage. Number 4. The tapeworm diet. We've all heard of strange fad diets, but the Victorians took eating clean to a whole new level of horror with the tapeworm diet. If you wanted a slim figure without giving up rich foods, you could simply pop a pill containing a beef tapeworm cyst. The science was technically sound in a horrific way. You swallow the cyst, it hatches, and the parasite attaches itself to your intestinal wall. It then eats a significant portion of your food for you. You could consume high calories and still lose weight because the parasite was taking the lion's share. However, the problem started with the side effects, which included severe malnutrition, constant gastrointestinal distress, and debilitating abdominal pain. Getting the parasite in was easy. Getting the 10-foot worm out was a nightmare, involving unreliable and crude removal methods. If the worm was not successfully removed, the resulting chronic fatigue and nutrient deficiency led to severe, long-term health complications. Number 3. The ice pick lobotomy. If a person was acting emotionally distressed, moody, or disruptive in the 1940s, medical science offered a radical, irreversible fix: the transorbital lobotomy. This procedure was popularized by neurologist Dr. Walter Freeman, who traveled in a van he called the lobotomobile. His technique was shockingly simple. He would take a patient, knock them out, and then slide a simple metal spike, often referred to as an ice pick, under their eyelid and through the thin bone of the eye socket. Once the spike was inside the frontal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for personality and decision-making, he would manipulate it to sever the critical neural connections. The intended result was to eliminate symptoms like anxiety and aggression. However, the actual outcome was tragic. Patients were fundamentally changed. They often lost their unique personality, became emotionally flattened, and suffered severe cognitive impairment, requiring lifelong supervision. It wasn't until the mid-1960s and the development of effective psychiatric drugs that medicine collectively realized that destroying a human brain's functional connections was an unethical and destructive approach. Number 2. Tobacco smoke enemas. You know the phrase blowing smoke up your ass. In the 1700s, this wasn't an idiom. It was a standard medical procedure for drowning victims. Picture this. You've just been pulled out of the river, barely breathing. Instead of CPR, a doctor would insert a tube into your rectum and use bellows to pump pure tobacco smoke into your intestines. The logic was that the heat and the stimulating properties of the tobacco smoke would warm the victim from the inside and shock their system back to life. It became so popular that emergency enema kits were installed along the River Thames. However, the practice was deeply dangerous. Nicotine is a potent toxin, and pumping a massive dose of it directly into the bloodstream via the highly absorbent rectal lining caused acute nicotine toxicity. This placed an immense, often fatal, strain on the heart and circulatory system of individuals already struggling for life. Eventually, medical knowledge improved, and the practice faded away as doctors realized putting smoke in the bottom end did nothing to aid the lungs on the top end. Number 1. Radioactive energy drinks. These days, health nuts are obsessed with superfoods, but in the early 20th century, the ultimate health trend was drinking radiation. Following the discovery of radium, people assumed that because it glowed and gave off energy, it must be good for you. It was marketed as liquid sunshine. Enter Radithor, a patent medicine that was water-laced with radioactive radium-226 and radium-228. Doctors prescribed it for everything: fatigue, arthritis, and a general lack of pep. The most famous user was a wealthy industrialist named Eben Byers, who consumed 3 bottles a day for several years. While he initially felt great, the internal damage was catastrophic. The body mistakes radium for calcium and deposits the radioactive element directly into the bone structure. Once embedded, the radium continuously emitted radiation, causing severe, irreparable bone tissue loss and systemic poisoning from the inside out. Byers suffered a long, painful decline involving severe disfigurement. The tragedy highlighted the extreme danger of ingesting radioactive materials, leading to stringent regulations against such health quackery.